everyone, welcome to Backstory Sessions. I'm your host Matt. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey everybody, it's Kat, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Backstory Sessions. I'm joined today by my co-host, Matt. Hey, Matt.
Hey Kat, hey everyone, how are you?
Well, Matt, happy autumn.
Oh my god. See, you even said it, autumn.
Well, for the listeners, we have a poll in our Backstory group page about how you pronounce A-U-T-U-M-N.
I believe it's pronounced fall.
Yes, some people did add that as a choice. However, of the choices that were originally listed of autumn
See, you even said it, autumn.
or autumn,
It's the same thing.
no,
Yeah,
A-W and A-H are not the same.
that's autumn.
Yeah, autumn.
No, it's A-U. Aw.
Aw.
Like caught, or, I don't know, fraud, or, I don't know, what's another AU word?
Laugh.
You're funny.
Adam. So, there's so many pronunciation, I guess, things that you could do, but I've just always called it autumn.
Yeah, you just said it. A-U. A-W.
Well, A-H. Autumn.
Okay, well, you're going to have...
to me. But a lot of people in the group, at first I was laughing. I was thinking, like, nobody's going to put A-W. Like, this is, like, the funny choice or whatever. But surprisingly, in the group, there's quite a few people, including you, that say that you pronounce it A-W. Aw.
Because that's the correct way.
Oh,
no. You sound like...
Anyways, we get to say happy fall, y'all. And,
you make it sound like people who say it that way are mentally challenged somehow.
Well, I don't want to make it sound like that per se, but
if the shoe fits, right?
Genetically challenged, I would say, might work or apply.
Okay.
I don't know. Just saying that I did not think that would be a choice, and definitely did not think that would be the choice of the way you say it. But in further investigation, I feel like we don't really say it that differently. It's just that when we look at that, we perceive it in two different ways. But I don't think it really sounds like, you don't really sound like you're saying autumn. Say that.
I'm not saying autumn.
Well, A-W is like aw. Aw.
Okay. We'll just agree to disagree.
Well, craw. Raw. Anyways, yeah. I don't think we're even disagreeing. I just think that when we look at it, like, my mind hears one thing and yours hears another, and then we say it, and we say it in a similar way.
Okay.
Possibly.
I'm still right.
We got a really interesting guest today. It's not often that we get, I don't even know, have we ever had the guest that is the child of, the person that we're discussing?
I sort of remember it once before, maybe, but I don't remember who it was.
Well, we had the granddaughter. If you remember, we had Jocelyn Ty talking about her grandmother when she got, that her college degree
Yeah, at like
in her 90s.
95 or whatever it was.
Um, but this is Rosemarie's daughter.
Yeah. So Rosemarie was on the Dick Van Dyke Show, as I recall, and other shows.
Well, definitely the Hollywood Squares. I'm going to throw that one in there
Oh
because,
yeah. She was on there for a while too.
yeah, that was a really popular show.
Yep.
Game shows were really popular at that time. And, my mom, especially, I don't remember my dad so much, but my mom, she always had Hollywood Squares on. So, of course
Yep.
I
I
picked her.
remember watching it when I got home from school.
Yeah. So, and they were funny, of course, like Paul Lynde, he was funny. And,
Yep.
yeah, and you never knew who was going to be in the square. And, like who would you choose if I mean, sometimes you had no choice. You had to choose to block someone. So you had to hope that,
Right.
Rosemarie or whoever was in that block would like get the answer for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you ever want to be on that game show?
The Hollywood Squares?
Yeah.
No, I can't recall ever wanting to be on a game show except maybe The Price is Right.
Well, I used to be really good at that show because, I love shopping and,
Not
it,
surprising.
yeah, I used to know prices like really good. I could get close, but
Mm-hmm.
what did you win on the Hollywood Squares? I wonder. I don't really remember,
It was
but
like maybe $500 or something. It wasn't a lot of money.
yeah. But like when you're after school coming home, it probably seemed like pretty good amount. You know
Sure.
what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, because I could get a lot of tiger beats and
Yeah.
what are those little sea monkey things you could order in
Oh
the
my God.
magazine?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, and join the record club. What was it? Was it RCA? I don't remember.
I think there was RCA and Columbia House and
Yeah. And they'd send you like they'd put you right in debt, when you're like 12 years old or 13 or whatever. And
yeah, you get like 12 8.
yeah, get all these 13 for free, and then you only have to buy one more in 3 years or whatever. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that I did not buy my, agreement, but it's entirely possible.
Yeah, I think I had one too.
Yeah. So, I mean, they tempt you like they'd have the latest, records or whatever.
Yeah, and then you'd have to sit there and squint to try and see what they were because they had them all stacked up and you know.
I know.
And then
The
they'd
good old days.
send you the catalog, and that was just like hours of enjoyment looking through that.
I know, and you had to narrow it down. Like I'd always be like, I'd pick out, and then I'd see another one. I'd be like, oh no, now I have to like,
Right?
choose
Who
to
am I
get
gonna?
rid of.
Yep.
Did you put stamps on there? Or, like I forget how you chose them, but maybe it was a code or something to the
Yeah,
one
I
that
think it was a code.
yeah. Probably had a pencil even, we're talking about old
Yeah.
school days.
Yep.
No copy paste, from the digital
No.
format.
No. No AI to help you pick them out and anything like that.
Well, okay, so to our guest, Rosemarie, and this being the daughter of, like, um, do you feel like, so if, I were to die, for instance, and someone then was interviewing you about my life, the experience that you knew with me, I mean, does this seem like odd to talk about someone else's life um,
I
when they
guess.
pass
I mean,
away? I guess.
I mean, it depends on who the person is. I mean, how well you knew them and whatever. I mean, obviously, I've only known you, what, 5 years now? And,
Right.
I only know the things that you've told me about from before then, so it would be hard to, talk with any, I don't know, with any, what's the word?
Credibility.
No, not credibility. I guess it's like, you know, we don't have any shared experiences before 5 years ago, so, I mean, it'd just be me relaying stories that you told me.
But in a way, like from the daughter's perspective, it's going to be like, until she was born, like however old her mother was, she wouldn't know that either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know how old her mother was when she was born, but I mean, there's a fair amount of history there.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting to just to think about telling the life of someone else, and even if it is your parents, like there's a lot of things about my parents I don't really know that I'd like to know. If I could ask them now, I certainly would. But you do like hear a lot of about someone from the stories that they tell you or someone else tells you.
Well, I mean, her mother was, her mother was pretty famous, and I'm sure there's a lot of appearances that were recorded, and you know interviews that she did and things like that. So, I mean, there's a little bit more there than someone who is not famous, I guess.
Yeah, because like, do you have like a lot of pictures of your parents?
No, I don't. I think I might have one of my mother and maybe one of my father, but I don't. I don't know. If you had to ask me where they were, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, so I don't have a whole lot of mine either. So I think that's probably not going to be the case for our guest today when we talk to Noopy about Rosemary, because I'm sure that she has photos from a very young age that have been made public because of she was a star like for really almost all of her life, basically.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely had a recognizable name for many, many years. Um, probably more so when she was on TV, and you know, um, she became famous then, more so. And then I'm sure before that, I know she had her career started when she was pretty young, as I remember.
Well, and of course, like now with social media, like everybody's posting photos of themselves or their friends, or so there's a lot more. Back in the day, even when we were like teenagers or whatever, you had the little cartridge, film cartridge that you put in the, was it 110 or one, I don't know, 120, I don't even know now, but it had a little cartridge you put in the phone, and you had to have a flash cube, um,
Oh yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah. No, in the
to take a
camera, you mean?
photo.
Yeah, yeah,
And before, then when the Polaroid thing come out where you could like let it dry for, 60 seconds or whatever, and voila, you could see the photo if you didn't like peel it off too soon and ruin it.
yeah.
Then that was like the greatest thing ever. So, I think maybe that's some of the reason there's not a whole lot of photos, is that it wasn't that practical like it is right now
Yeah, you had
to
to
take
take
a
them and
photo.
get them developed, and all that. So
Yeah. So, it probably was not, I don't think it was a priority to my parents to do so.
yeah,
Um,
we just you know, I don't believe we took a lot of pictures. Maybe during the holidays or something, but generally not like just random things.
Well, and you got the school photo, like so every year at school you get your school photos. So that was at least one time in the year.
Right.
Uh, they'd have like probably the ugliest photo of you. You know what I mean? 'Cause it's like
Yeah.
usually on picture day, it's like it's never like you forget that it is picture day, or you're having a bad hair day or
Yep.
something. Or in your case, you want to tell that story about your school proof and photo and
Um, what story is that?
with the marker and
Yeah. Apparently, I didn't like the photo, so when I got it home, I drew on it with a green marker and gave myself a mustache.
yeah, and I don't think your mom was probably too happy about that.
Probably not, because I had three older brothers, and getting our pictures made was kind of a big deal, I guess.
Right.
Because it cost a few bucks, and then multiply that times however many, and it was a little rough. But yeah, I mean, I was only like, I couldn't have been more than third or fourth grade at the time, so.
Yeah. Well, it's creative. It was showing that you had creativity at an early age.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm even worse. I really hate having my picture taken now. So.
Well, I feel sorry for you in that way, but
Oh.
it does not mean that it doesn't need to be taken.
Sorry, I'm getting over a cold.
Yeah. Um, I think a lot of people are experiencing that this time of the year, and
Yep.
I've heard many different theories about why that is. So
Yeah.
hopefully you feel better, and
Yeah, I'm fine. Just getting over it, and So anyway, so our guest is what?
Noopy.
Yeah, she's got like a really long name though.
Yeah, she does. Georgiana is her real name, but she has asked that we just refer to her as Noopy, so we will.
Okay.
And it's going to be really fascinating because, as I said, I think like hearing the life story from someone else besides that person is a fascinating angle, and it being the daughter just gives it a little extra specialness, I feel like.
Yeah. So is there like a documentary coming out, or is there? I know there was some like music released.
Yes, 100 years. So this is the 100th year of her birthday. She would have been 100 years old,
Yeah, I think
and
she passed away last year or something.
she didn't make it to be 100, but she was in her 90s, and to have a career like that's amazing from a very young age.
Yeah, and then she probably over the years met quite a few people, I would imagine.
Yeah, can you imagine that? I did ask something like that in the Facebook group about, can you imagine like we come home and watch the Hollywood Squares, but can you imagine we come home and Dean Martin's in your living room or Lucille Ball or
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
I guess,
that would be interesting.
yeah, I guess it was just commonplace probably, for people that grow up with celebrity parents.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, we've heard that before from other people where
yep.
there's been a lot of a lot of parties and things going on that people showed up and sleeping on their couch or whatever.
And I'll be curious to see, if she had any celebrity crushes or, was she starstruck from it all. So,
Yeah, I can imagine, and
yeah.
it
So
will be interesting.
lots lots to learn in this episode, and Rosemary really. So the music's being released. So I think a lot of people remember her for acting and comedy, but also, she had a long career with music. So very, very talented.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, she was pretty funny though. Be interesting to see if she's like that at home.
Yeah, well, we got a lot of questions, so let's get some answers.
All right, sounds good. Here we go.
Noopy, I want to welcome you to Backstory Sessions today. We are really honored to have you as our guest.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we want to talk about your mother, of course, and all the stories that you have to tell the fans and the listeners. A 90-plus year career. I mean, most people don't get that in any field, much less in entertainment.
Absolutely true. She started when she was 3 years old, and she never stopped.
So at 3 years old, like a lot of kids are, can't even stay like in one place long enough to do anything. But she had a radio show.
She had her own radio show when she was 5 on NBC, and it was very popular. And then what happened is that people, because her voice sounded very much adult, she had a very strong voice, and people thought, well, that's not really a kid. That's a small person out there that's just singing. So they put her on the road. And she wound up doing vaudeville. So she started radio and then went into vaudeville on top of that, which, she basically has encompassed every part of show business that there is. So she went on vaudeville, and in those days, they did 8-9 shows a day.
Yeesh.
And she was singing. And when she was in Cleveland, her father got arrested because of the child labor law. So he got arrested. They would bail him out, and then he'd come back out. She would go out. She would do her show, and then he'd go out and he'd get arrested again. I think he was arrested over 100 times.
Wow.
So but she kept singing, and of course vaudeville was just wonderful. I mean, she made, a lot of friends and stuff like that. And George Burns, Gracie Allen was playing then, and all the old vaudevillians, all the comics were there. And she was a kid, and they loved her. And her father was kind of connected with the mob at that time. She happens to have a documentary out called Wait for Your Laugh, which basically encompasses her 90-year career. And we start when she's a child star, and we just keep moving on up from there. It's been a very popular documentary. And if you want to watch it, and if you're Amazon Prime, you can watch it for free. So it's a great, great documentary, and it's won all sorts of awards and everything. And it basically encompasses her entire career. So anyway, so from there, and then then the mob got involved, and Al Capone actually contacted her father, and she went over to Al Capone's house because he wanted to meet her.
Wow.
So that's also in the film. That's also in her book. And he basically gave her a gold ring and told her father, keep an eye on her and all that kind of stuff. And so the mob has always kind of encompassed our life, because when she opened Vegas, she worked for Bugsy Siegel. She was the first one to play Vegas when he opened up the Flamingo. Yeah, it just goes on from there. I mean, it's a marvelous story, and it's an amazing 90-year career, and it just goes on from there. So, I mean,
So,
what can I say? You know?
well, of course, already you're telling me so much more than I imagined of the backstory, but did she come from musical parents, or like she just at 3 just started singing, or?
No, actually, it was an amateur contest, and her mother put her on the stage at 3, and of course she won at 3 years old. You know, I mean, how can you not have a kid like that win? And in fact, she named her book "Hold the Roses" because when she won, they gave her roses, and she walked backstage and she told the person there, "Please hold my roses. I have to take my bow." So from that day on, it basically started, and then the word got around that there was this phenom, a 3-year-old that had a voice like Sophie Tucker at that time, who was a very popular singer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it basically started from there. Her father became her manager and was the one on the road with her and basically dealt with the theaters and all of that. So that's how it started. There was really no musical background at all. She could just sing, and that was what she did. And as a matter of fact, on the CD that we just released, you can hear her sing as a 5-year-old, and it's amazing. I mean, you're gonna go, there's no way this kid is 5 years old. So, and it basically started from there. So she's encompassed every bit of show business that there is when you think about it, you know. And so started that young. She never complained about it. She was never a child star that went kind of off the rails. She had a strict upbringing because of her parents, and she loved it. She absolutely loved it. It was never a problem. She was actually, here's something that a lot of people don't know. She was the first one to lip sync, because in one of the theaters they wouldn't let her sing because she was a child. So they had recorded her. They played the recording backstage, and she lip synced to it. So she was actually the first one to lip sync as a 5-year-old.
Ahead of her time.
So that and she always took pride in the fact that her first name was the one that was on the marquee. And she said she was the first. Later, you know, she said later Cher, Madonna, and all these other ones came out, but she said I was the first. She took great pride in that.
Well, I know that it said you've started 100 days of Rosemarie Facts, and that each day on social media there would be a different fact for 100 days. So what are some of those interesting facts that have been shared?
Well, you know, some of them, first of all, the reason that we started to even do this 100-year thing was because of the fans, and the reason that we actually released the CD of her singing throughout her life was because of the fans. And the fans actually, when she passed away, she had 35,000 fans. She now has 65,000 fans.
Wow.
So she's actually gotten more fans now than whatever. Yeah. I mean, it's just her fan base is amazing, and her assistant, who later became my assistant, she basically started out as a fan, and I learned a lot about fans and how the loyalty and everything. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we basically decided to do was that we had all these recordings from doing the documentary, because it took us 3 years to do her documentary because of all, she saved everything.
Yeah.
We had 65 scrapbooks. We had 20 cans of 16 millimeter film.
Wow.
Wow.
We had 20 reels of 8 millimeter film, because my parents loved to take home movies. And we had recordings. We had reel-to-reel cassettes. It was insane. It was absolutely insane. So one of the facts that, of course, that we say is that how much material we had to go through about her, career. Another fact is that she met Maury Amsterdam when she was doing vaudeville. So she's known Maury Amsterdam since the 30s.
Wow.
And so, most everybody knows her because of Dick Van Dyke.
Right.
Right.
And, and Dick Van Dyke was only 5 years of her life. But one of the facts that I had put in the film, that I insisted get put in the film, is the fact that the residual schedule, and this is one of the facts that we actually have, after the whole residual schedule was different then in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And so after 1968, she hasn't made $1 off of Dick Van Dyke Show.
Wow.
Hasn't made $1. And every time that part in the film would come up, the audience would gasp, because I was standing in the back. And Peter Marshall narrates the film, and he says, she hasn't made any money, because people thought, well, she's rolling in it.
Right.
She's I mean, because as we talk here, the show's running somewhere right now.
Yeah.
And so, but she didn't make any money. Maury didn't make any money. Even Mary didn't make any money at that time, because she was new.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only people that actually made the money are the people that owned the show, which was Dick and Danny Thomas and Sheldon Leonard and Carl Reiner. So those four were the only ones that actually make money every time the show is sold. But she hasn't made $1 off of Dick Van Dyke Show since 1968.
Wow.
So that's kind of a fact that we have out there right now. And everybody gets amazed, because, nowadays with Friends and Cheers and all of those shows, when everybody was making $1 million a show,
right,
and, residuals are just as good. I mean, those guys on Friends will never have to worry.
right,
And it's a whole different thing. So a lot of people never understood that. They all thought, well, she's just rolling in it. And after my father passed away, and they had a wonderful marriage, they had a great marriage, and he got a unknown blood disease that to this day they still don't know what it was. And he passed away. He was only 48 years old. And so she became a single mother, and I was going to school, and she had to support, because the show was over. Dick Van Dyke Show was done.
right.
So she had to go out, and she worked, and she did all these sitcoms and all. Somebody told me the other day, oh, I saw your mother on Adam 12. I saw your mother on SWAT. And if everybody thinks that all of these residuals, I had to tell them, and this is true. She did a show called Alf. I don't know if you know what that was. It was about a
alien. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Some sort of a alien or something that was out there. And so I got this check in the mail, and it was for a residual that she had done in Alf, and it was 38 cents.
Oh, jeez.
Wow.
And I think the best one was when we were shooting the documentary. We were shooting at her house, and Jason Wise, who was the producer director, the mail had come, and he said, "Oh," he goes, "your mail's here." And I said, "Yeah, okay." And I walked over and I got the mail, and he says, "Oh, you got a residual check." And I went, "Yeah, boy, can't wait." And he said, "Can I open it?" I said, "Be my guest." And I handed him the envelope. This is actually a true story. I handed him the envelope, and he took the check out, and the look on his face was priceless. I said, "How much is it?" He said, 1 cent.
Wow.
And he said, "Can I have it? I want to frame it and put it in my office." I said, "You know what, Jason? It's all yours." It cost him more to mail it.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, it was for 1 cent. So the whole residual scale back then was
not good.
Crazy. I mean, you're making pennies. I mean, literally making pennies, which is probably one of the reasons why all these writers and everybody are on strike right now, because it's going to get worse, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So those are some of the facts that we're putting on, because a lot of people don't realize how different things are now than they were back then.
Yeah.
Because people see what they see now and they think it was the same way then.
Sure.
But
what was her mom like? Was she naturally funny, like off stage? Like, what was her personality like?
Well, her personality, you have to understand, both of my father was a very talented musician, and he was very popular in the town, and he played with Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra. And at that time that they were together, there were a lot of variety shows on the air. And he played them all. He played a lot of record dates. Someone actually told me the other day, they said, "Oh, I have an album that your father's on." And
wow.
He was a very popular musician. So you have to understand that I grew up in a very musical kind of situation. Both of my parents were in the business, and both of them were extremely popular. And but when they were home, because of the upbringing and everything, it was family. We sat down and we were a family, and that's how it was. There was, people asked me, "Oh, did she go around singing around the house?" No. When she was home, she was my mother, and she acted like a mother. And she cooked, and she took care of the house, and she loved taking, making, she loved to cook. And at that time, the big thing in the entertainment world was dinner parties. Everybody had to have a dinner party.
Right.
And she, of course, loved it because she cooked for days. Italians, they cook for days.
Yeah.
And she would have these people over, and she loved it. She loved to entertain. She loved to cook. And the big thing was parties, dinner parties. And they'd sit and they'd laugh and they'd tell jokes. And one night Steve Allen was at the house, and he was over at the piano just doodling all night long. He just didn't want to converse with anybody. He just sat at the piano all night long and just played. And then finally his wife Jane went over and said, "Come on, Steve, we're gonna eat," And it was that kind of an atmosphere growing up. I don't know if they do that anymore. I don't think that they do, but they love to entertain. They had parties in the beginning, before my mother was on television. Most of their friends were musicians because of my father. And my father had a very unique tone. And on the CD that we have out, Kathy Brown, who is the producer, she sent me all 29 tracks, most of which I had never heard. And I was listening to them, and I could pick out the tracks that my father was on because of his tone. I could hear it.
Aw.
And I would say to her, okay, this song, he was on that one, right? And she'd go, yeah. And I said, well, he was on this one. She'd go, yep. And I said, yeah. I said, he had such a tone that I could pick it out. And I had musicians come up to me after he passed away telling me how much they liked him and how talented he was. And
was there like
so it was that kind of a household growing up, it wasn't like, how can I say it? It wasn't like my mother was walking around cracking jokes all day long.
Yeah.
Okay, because that was work, that was her job, that was it. But she loved to entertain, and of course jokes happened when there were people there, but I was young, and I would come out after one of these dinner parties after people had eaten for like 3 or 4 hours, and they were all on the floor. And I said, what are you guys doing on the, how come they're on the floor? And they're going, oh, we're so full, we can't move. Oh my God, you can't move. We ate too much. And my grandmother would come out from Jersey, and she would get off the plane with bags of food because California doesn't have food like Jersey does.
Yeah.
So bags of food would come off the plane.
My
grandmother would start cooking, and my mother finally said to her one day, she goes, Mother, you can't make this much food. She said, you got to know, people don't eat like this anymore. And she said, they don't know how to eat. That's what she said.
Were there any guests that you saw at these parties that you were...
Oh, gosh, yes. Okay, here is a great story. My mother was close friends with Lucille Ball.
Mm-hmm.
And Lucy called her up one day, and she said, Desi and I are going to stop by the house because they were shooting a movie called The Long, Long Trailer.
I remember that.
And they were shooting up in the hills in, California, whatever. Yeah. And they said, so she said, can we stop by after we're done? And of course, my mother said, yeah. So you have to understand that I was used to seeing these people. So I was not starstruck.
Right.
They were my parents' friends to me. I was a kid.
Yeah.
And they were my friends. And so my mother comes in, and I guess Desi had stopped by the house and brought some wine or something and said, okay, we'll see you later. Okay, so of course my mother starts cooking, whatever. And so then they called and they said, okay, we're done, we'll be there. And I said, okay, because my mother's and parents' house was kind of like on the way home off the 405.
Mm-hmm.
So so they stopped by and they're out there and I'm not fazed by this.
Yeah.
And then Lucy said, oh, we got to do a scene. And she said it was so good. It just really worked. So her and Desi do a scene in the living room from the Long, Long Trailer.
Wow.
And Lucy says, oh, Desi was great, and blah, 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 and they're talking and all of this. And they all go, oh, it's great, and whatever. And anyway, Lucy and Desi leave. And my mother turns to me and says something to the fact of, well, what do you think of that? That's like, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz just did a scene in our living room. And I went, yeah. And she got really mad because she said, you don't, it doesn't mean anything to you, right? And I said, no, I got to go in and do my homework. And she couldn't, she used to tell that story. She could not believe I wasn't touched by it or something, because to me they were it was just another two people that were friends of my parents.
Yeah.
And Lucy called her up one day. Lucy actually was they were really good friends. They talked a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And Lucy called her up one day and said, they've asked me to teach a class at UCLA on comedy. And my mother said, oh, great, whatever. And so she goes, no, I need you to come down and help me with this. There's no way that I can do this. And so my mother went, and Lucy and my mother did this class at UCLA. Because I remember my mother saying, I have to go to UCLA. And I said, why do you have to go to UCLA? And she said, well, Lucy's going to be teaching a class on comedy, and she wants me there to help her because she can't do it by herself. And I said, oh, okay.
I can't imagine that.
It just, it's
yeah.
One of the things on my first job when I got hired on a show called the Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder.
Yeah. And
the producer of the show had said to me later, he said, you know why I hired you? And I said, no, why? He said, because I knew you wouldn't get starstruck.
Ah.
He said, I didn't need somebody that was my assistant that would be going, oh my God, it's so-and-so. Oh my God, it's so-and-so. And he said, I just need, and he said, and you were exactly the one. And I said, well, because, I was around it all the time.
Yeah.
And they were friends of my parents. They had a Lauren Green and his wife came over one night because they all played bridge. They all sat at a table and they played bridge. I mean, this is the kind of life that they, I mean, work was work, but friends were friends, and that's how it was, and it was devastating when my father passed away because my mother went into a very deep depression, and in fact didn't want to do the last year of the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Wow.
And John Rich, who was the director, came over and they sat with her all night long and talked her into coming back because she said, I don't think I can be funny.
Yeah.
Because she was so down. And it's amazing the show business community. It's like the old line, it's not a gang, it's a club.
Right.
And they really took care of her, and they really, Dean Martin called her and said he wanted her to do his show, and she said, Dean, I can't. And he said, I want you to sing. And he said, no. She said, no, I can't. There's no way I can sing.
Yeah.
And he said, no, you got to do it. You pick out the song, and we'll have it arranged, and you come in. And he said, and I'll sit right there with you. And she said, Dean, I don't think, really. And he finally pressed her, and she went in, and the song that she picked was Little Girl Blue. And Little Girl Blue is on the CD. And she sings it, and he's right there with her on the show. And after that, he would say, I'm going to do these roasts. Why don't you come on and do one of the roasts,
Yeah.
And it was a way of getting her back out. And then, of course, Hollywood Squares.
Right, yeah.
Was the other thing that happened. And they called her up for Squares. And she said, well, I can do that. I don't really have to perform,
Yeah, yeah.
I think I can handle that. And so she wound up doing that for 11 years.
Wow.
So, that, and then in between that, doing every sitcom in the world that was out there, I think. And, but, she loved working. She really did. And she just kept going. There was that year that she just didn't want to do anything because of my father passing away.
Right.
And she just, she just did it. But it was people like Dean and Jerry Lewis and people like that called and got her up and got her. My father, Jerry Lewis loved my father, and my father is on the soundtrack of every Jerry Lewis movie. And so Jerry was very close with my father. And in fact, used to call him in the hospital, and unbeknownst to anybody would go over there at night and sit with my father and make him laugh and stuff like that. These are things that a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
They only hear the lousy side of what
Right.
somebody does,
Yeah.
but they don't hear the good side. And people like Dean and Frank and Jerry and Maury and all of those that just really, really rallied and really got her up and, going, because it was really bad after he passed away. It really was.
Yeah.
So it was the one part of her life that she really didn't do that much. And when we were filming the documentary, we of course had a lot of home movies with them, together and all that. And
Right.
I mean, women were just crying their eyes out watching the film, because so much of the film is basically a love story. And most documentaries aren't.
Yeah. Yeah.
There isn't a love story in there, but in this one there certainly is. It's a wonderful film.
How did your parents meet?
Well, my father was in the Army, and she was performing, and he was playing in the band, in an Army band, and they were playing in a club. And my father also, there was a guy that made 3 or 4 movies with an orchestra, and his name was Kay Kaiser. And my father was in those films, because somebody said, well, your father was an actor. I said, no, not really. I said he was in those Kay Kaiser films where he's kind of in the back and he's playing and all of that. But he was actually playing in a band, and she and a girlfriend went and heard the band. And she spotted him, and it was like, that is the guy. And she said to her friend, she said, I'm going to marry that fat sergeant, was what she said. and he said, no, he's not fat, and so they met at this club, and they talked. They were sitting at the bar, and she was with a girlfriend, and he came up, and he was with one of his buddies, and it was one of those chit-chatty things, and they hit it off. And the problem was that it was not as easy as it should be, because her father, she was the bread maker, and the father didn't want her to have anything to do with a guy.
Right.
And so the father started to really push, and she and my father wound up eloping. And that's how they got married, because my father had said to her, he said, look, he said, I have jobs in California, because they were in New York at the time. And he said, I have jobs, I have Bing's radio show, and I have all this work. And he said, I have to go to California. So he said, either you go with me or that's it. And she said, I'm going. And literally, which is what we show in the film, literally the suitcase out the window with her girlfriend outside. I mean, it's like it really is a movie. And she threw the suitcase out, and she snuck out of the house. And her father, while they were driving across the country, her father was calling people saying, "Stop him, the guy's a drug addict," and making all these kind of comments about him, and didn't make it easy. But you know, they just kept on going, and that was it. And he had gotten out of the Army, and he had all the work in California for his job, because he was, like I said, he was a very popular musician at that time. And I mean, really, truly, up until the day he passed away, he was quite well known in this town. And that was it. So that's how they met. It literally was, he was in the Army, and he was playing in a band where the service guys were playing in the band, I guess, to make extra money or whatever on their days off. And that was how they met.
Well, that makes me all the more curious then about this story with Frank Sinatra and how he is the first to find out that she's pregnant.
Well, that's very true. What happened was, she was picking my father up at NBC because he had played a radio show or TV show, I don't know which, but anyway, she was basically picking him up. And Frank, of course, knew her from her playing nightclubs, because after she got out of the child star thing, she was in that awkward age where she was playing nightclubs. So she was playing Copacabana, she was playing all these things, which is how she knew all these people. There was Frank, there was Jerry and Dean, and they were all playing clubs at the time. That was the big deal, was nightclubs. So she of course knew Frank, and so Frank was coming out of NBC, and she was waiting outside by the car, and hey, Rosie, hi Frank, blah blah blah. And the big hug, and he goes, how are you doing? And she says, well, Frank, I just found out I'm pregnant. And oh my God, that's great. And he goes, does Bobby know? And she said, no, I'm waiting to tell him. He's just going to come out. So he says, oh my God, so of course Frank stayed, and out walks my father, hi Bobby, hi Frank, and Frank's like looking like, okay, say something. So she goes, well, I just had to tell Frank I just found out I'm pregnant, and so the three of them hugged, and it was a big deal and all that. But the weirdest thing is that later on in life, I developed this thing for Frank Sinatra. I just loved Frank Sinatra. He was like, if I could say I was starstruck, it was with Frank Sinatra. It really was. And I just was crazy about him. I really was. And I went and saw all his shows, and I was like his biggest fan. I really was. And I met him, which is a whole other story. And I couldn't talk. I mean, I just looked at him and went, nothing came out of my mouth. And he's staring at me, and because my mother's behind me, and he had seen her first, and he had gotten up, hey Rosie, how you doing? The hug, blah blah blah. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, it's Frank Sinatra. It's right here. It's right in front of me. Oh my God.
How old were you?
21.
Ah.
So yeah, I couldn't. It's such a thing with Frank, because I just became. It's.
Yeah.
I had liked a male singer. My father was playing on his show, and I'd gone over to NBC, and I had liked him at the time. This wasn't Frank. This was somebody else. And And my father introduced me to him, and he like fluffed me off. He went, "Yeah, hi kid, how you doing?" You know, turned around, walked away.
Yeah.
And boy, I was really upset about that. So I went home, and every album I had of his, I threw in the trash. I did. And so I thought to myself, well, you know, I was petrified to meet Frank, because I thought, if he's the same way, I'll die.
Yeah.
That'll be the end of my life. I'll die. and so I started this thing. I got this idea. This is crazy, but it's true. That if I was in a very nice restaurant, I would say, so does Frank Sinatra come in here a lot? And they go, oh yeah, he comes in here. And so I said, do me a big favor, get a big kick out of it. And they said, what? And I said, tell him Noopy says hello. And they go, really? And I go, yeah. Just tell him Noopy says, oh, okay. So I did this for like a year in certain places that I knew. So I'm walking into this beauty supply store, which is in the Valley at the time. Guys, the owner's in the back. He's got all these pictures of all these stars up on the wall. And I said, and I see Frank up there. And I said, oh, hey. I said, do you know Frank? And he goes, yeah, he keeps his boat next to mine. And I said, no kidding. He goes, yeah. And I said, do me a big favor. Get a big kick out of it. And I go into the routine. To tell him Noopy says hello. And he goes, really? And I go, yeah, I'm telling you. He'll love it. Fall down laughing. He'll love it. No kidding. Absolutely. So the next time I go in, now I've totally forgotten about this. So the next time I go into the beauty supply store, he's motioning to me from the back with the finger. Come here, you know. And I walk back and he goes, why the hell didn't you tell me you didn't know Frank? And I said, Jesus, you didn't really do it, did you? And he said, yeah, I did. He said, I even took him away from some people to tell him. I said, oh my God, you're kidding. He said, no. I said, I got to know, what did he say? And he said, well, he said, I don't know this Noopy, but I've heard this before. And I just broke up. I said, no kidding. Oh, my God. So now time passes, and we are going to an event at the Century Plaza here in L.A., and they are honoring Frank as the entertainer of the century, not of the year, of the century.
Wow.
And he's at a table on the thing, and my date that night was John Shuck, who used to be on McMillan and Wife, and he was a friend. And so I said, John, Frank's gonna be, and he goes, I know, you know, don't even worry about it. So okay, so anyway, it's my mother and a friend of hers and me and John, and we're at this thing, and so I walk into the room, and I look down on the table, and here's this huge round table, and there's photographers on top of photographers, and the poor guy's trying to eat. Well, forget it. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's not going to happen. And there's flash bulbs going off all over the place. So whatever. So we go to our table, and my mother says to me, she says, come on. And I said, what do you mean, come on? She said, and of course my mother knew the whole story, you know.
Yeah.
Tell Frank Noopy says hello story. She absolutely knew it. So she grabs me by the arm, and she said, come on, let's go. I said, no. And so she goes, no, you're going to meet Frank. And I went, no, I don't want to. No, please. And she grabbed me by the arm. No, please. No. I said, you know, let me just admire him from afar. It's fine. I don't want to meet him. It's fine. She goes, come on, we're going to go. And she and she's grabbing me by the arm. And I mean to tell you, I'm serious. My legs were jello. They really were. And we start to walk towards the table. And Frank turns around, and he sees my mother, and he immediately stands up, and he goes, "Hi, Rosie," big hug. And I'm standing there, and of course, nothing's coming out of my mouth. I'm just standing there like an idiot. And so she says, "Frank," she goes, "I want you to meet my daughter, Noopy." And she emphasizes Noopy when she says it. And he says, "Hello," and he puts his hand out, and I shake his hand, and nothing's coming out of my mouth, nothing. And he's holding my hand, and he's looking at me, and he's smiling. And she goes, "Frank, doesn't the name Noopy mean anything to you?" Now he's really looking at me. Now I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be the end of the world. And now he's looking at me, and he's going, "I don't think so." And so she said, "Frank, have you been getting messages that says Noopy says hello, and you see him react?" And she goes, "This is Noopy." And he goes, "Oh my God, that's great. Oh my God." He goes, "Come here, baby." And he grabs me and plants one right on my lips. I am like frozen. And he goes, and he looks at me, and he goes, "That is great." Rather than somebody that just, because I said, "Oh my God." Yeah. So he said, and of course, 8,000 flash bulbs go off. You think I could find that picture? I can't find that picture.
Really?
Wow.
And I had learned it was the foreign press. I don't know where the heck it is. I don't know. I've got we've been trying to find it for years. We can't find it. I know the pictures were taken because the flash bulbs went off.
Yeah.
Because, he's planting one on my lips. And so I went, nothing came out of my mouth. Honest to God, nothing.
Yeah, you got to get that picture.
Okay. I turned around, and I walked back, and it's like I'm thinking to myself, okay, the atom bomb can fall right now. I don't care what happens to me right now. And we walked back, and both people that came with us, John's looking at me like, "Well," and I'm not saying a word. I sit down, I'm quiet, and everybody's looking at me like, "You just had Frank Sinatra kiss you on the lips. Come on." And I went, "Oh." And I went, "Oh my God, he kissed me." That's all I could say. Well, the word got out that there was this association at the time that was a group of secretaries that were with famous stars. Mm-hmm. And Frank's secretary was a lady named Dorothy Ullman. And she heard about the story, and she loved it. She absolutely loved the story. Mm. So my husband and I, now we're in Vegas, and Frank's playing at Caesar's Palace at the time. And I said, "Why don't we go see Frank?" And my husband said, "Well, how the hell are we going to get in there? It's Frank Sinatra at Caesar's Palace."
Right.
I said, No, I'm going to call." So I called, and I asked for Dorothy's name, because Dorothy had heard the story, and I had said hello to her, and she very sweet, very nice. She loved it. She absolutely loved the story. And so I asked for her room. And I said, "Dorothy, this is Noopy." That's all I had to say. "This is Noopy." "Hey, Noopy, hi, how are you?" And I said, "Listen," I said, "my husband and I were in Vegas. Any chance we can see Frank?" She goes, "Yeah, can you come to the second show?" I said, "Yeah, sure." "Okay, we'll come to the second show, and so we sat at Frank's table. Oh, my God, I cannot tell you. Sat at Frank's table, and what was interesting was my husband had played golf with these people, and they were sitting across from us. Never knew that that they were connected with Frank. I sat next to this pilot, and it was, when you sit at Frank's table, I learned one thing. Like, if you order a scotch and soda, You get a bucket of ice, you get a full bottle of soda, one of the big bottles of soda, and a bottle of scotch. You don't get a drink. You get a bucket and 2 bottles.
Make your own.
Because the guy across from me, he said, I'll have a scotch and soda. Well, here come the buckets. And I'm looking and I'm going, oh my God. And then I said, you know, I could live like this.
Yeah.
I could really do this. I'm thinking to myself, this is pretty good. And Frank knew, when he was performing, Frank knew where his table is.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point, he would sing or he would do something and he'd walk over to the table and he would bend down and he'd say to us something like, he said, I never should have had so much pasta tonight. And we all laughed and we all, you know, it was an inside joke. And I'm thinking, well, I'm in heaven, you know.
Yeah.
So Frank became my number one person, so to speak. And then, of course, later on, you know, I found out that you know, Mother said, well, he was the first one to find out I was pregnant with you. So so that's my Frank Sinatra story.
So
and
did you ever get a chance to talk to him?
Never on a one-to-one basis. No, it was just that one time.
Yeah.
And of course, Dorothy, on my birthday, would send me stuff, and you know, I've got things that Frank signed and notes that Frank signed and all of that. But I never really got I personally, I don't listen. I don't think I could have talked to him anyway. I was so tongue-tied, like this typical type fan that can't talk. And when Frank passed away, I think I got more calls to me than his widow did, because they go, Noopy, we heard Frank passed away. Are you all right? Are you all right? And I go, yes, I'm fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but I saw him perform so many times, and you know, people would say, oh, he's going to dog a show. I never saw. Every time I saw him, he just was fantastic. He really was. And
awesome.
I of course learned later that he, you know, again, like Dean and all of them, when I had learned that when Ernie Kovacs died, that he called his widow and said, I'm here for you, whatever you need. You know, do you need money and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that was what these people used to do that nobody knew, you know. And they were really good friends and always kind, nice, never, you know, and of course, because of the closeness, and if you played Vegas, of course, you worked for the mob. Right. Anybody that ever played Vegas was basically working for the mob. And so you had the whole mob, you know, connection, and they loved my mother because they wanted to take care of her. And Peter Marshall had an act with another guy named Tommy Noonan, and Peter used to say, that's how I supported my family, was playing in Vegas. And he said they were great because they treated you great. And he said, look, you know, as long as you didn't mess with them or try to steal from them or try to make a pass at their women, he said you were fine, you know. And he said, without Vegas, he said, I couldn't have supported my family. He said, I couldn't have done it. So Vegas became a very important part of all of this group. And of course, everybody knew everybody.
Yeah.
And everybody took care of everybody. And it was a nice feeling. And my mother played Vegas a lot. I mean, you know, they would call her and they'd say, okay, you know, we want you to play the Sahara this week or something. She'd go, okay, I'm there. And you didn't say no, in other words.
Yeah, of course.
You didn't say, no, I'm busy.
Yeah. Sorry, can't make it.
I have a shower to go to.
Yeah.
No. So, you just do it. And there's a whole thing in her film about, the mob, of course.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. And I was always fascinated with the mob. Really was.
I'm
Thought it was
curious.
pretty cool.
I'm curious. Have you been back to Vegas recently?
Yeah, I do go to Vegas. Because I was there as a kid
Yeah.
for so long, and when my mother was playing there, and of course my father was here, but then if he had some time off, he would put me in the car and he and I would drive to Vegas because he wanted to be with her. But yes, I have been to Vegas recently. It's but the last time my mother went to Vegas, she was honored at one of the hotels as one of the premier, I think it was at the Tropicana at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they had like her and the Smothers Brothers and
Yeah.
people like that were there. And we were on the plane, and I said to her, take a look out the window, Mother, and look at Vegas. Because when she was there, one of the things that she did on her little 8mm camera was every time she'd play, she'd drive down the strip and she'd take a film.
Yeah.
And so you'd see one hotel, and then you'd see desert. And then maybe another hotel, or maybe like the El Rancho, which was one of the first hotels there.
Right. Yeah.
And so her film, her home movies, basically categorized how Vegas was being built. But of course, when she was there, it was desert.
Yeah.
No, I mean when she opened up the Flamingo Hotel, there was this fancy Flamingo Hotel in desert.
Yeah.
And so, but I always had this thing about Vegas, and as a kid, I loved the slot machines, and in those days, the carpet would change when you were in the casino as opposed to, so as a kid, I wasn't allowed to go in there.
All right. Yeah.
So I'd stand on the edge of the carpet. I do remember that. And either my father would play a slot machine so I could watch,
Yeah.
and then later on, in later years, there was Hollywood Squares used to have junkets where they'd go to places, and some of the stars on Hollywood Squares, and either hotels would pay for them to go, or and they would get a free vacation or whatever. So one of the times was Vegas. So it was my mother and Peter Marshall, and God, I forget who else was there, maybe Karen Valentine.
Mm-hmm.
But people like that, and I said, well, now I can gamble because I'm old enough.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay. So my mother did what every good mother should do and taught me blackjack. And so I became obsessed with blackjack.
Kind of like Frank.
And I loved the game. I absolutely loved it, but I was petrified to put money down. But I loved the game.
Yeah.
And so she had gone to bed, and I went down to the casino and I played blackjack. I mean, I got into it. I just loved it. And I had a dealer once tell me, he says, you play the game. He said, as good as anybody. He said, but you bet lousy. He says, that's why you lose.
Yeah.
And I said, well, okay, teach me how to bet. And we were at the Desert Inn. Okay, that's how long ago that was.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, put this down. Okay, double that. Okay, take that chip back. Do this. And I mean, he literally taught me how to gamble.
Awesome.
So I do go to Vegas, but and I still love the game of blackjack. I really do. And I can play it but I don't bet a lot of money. I mean, I'm not a big time gambler because I just enjoy the game. And
Right.
if I have a good table with a lot of people with friends, like it's fun.
Yeah.
And I always try to sit in what they call third base, because that's the last chair before the dealer gets the card.
Right.
And if there's somebody that's sitting in that chair that doesn't know what they're doing, I just get terribly frustrated because I go, no, let her break. No,
You don't know what you're doing.
yeah, so it's like, I have to sit in that chair or else I won't play. But and
funny.
like I said, I don't bet a lot of money. I really don't, because I don't, I mean, I put down $10 or $15. That's my life down there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I see these guys that come up with, $100 chips and stack them up, and play and all that. There's no way
Yeah.
I can do that. No way. But I love the game and I enjoy Vegas, even though it's changed so much.
Yeah.
And it's just not the same. And I get frustrated because, as a kid, it was always really special to me. But, so and if it's crowded, I won't go on the weekends. I think it's a zoo.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I just won't go. And I like to go in the middle. The best time I had in Vegas was during COVID. I went
because there wasn't anybody
I
there.
was at the Wynn and there was nobody there.
Yeah,
and it was
yeah.
great, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was like there's nobody in there. So, that was great, but it has gotten to be so commercialized and
Yeah.
the big money guys are there and there's so much, and the limits are like ridiculous, or and it's just not the same. So I can't enjoy it like I used to, but I go because the restaurants are great.
Yeah.
The chefs are wonderful there, and you can go in there and have a fantastic meal. You really can.
So, do you prefer the Strip or do you prefer downtown?
I only went to downtown when they opened Cirque. When that opened, I went in.
Oh, okay.
And I thought that was nice. But now I'm hearing, I haven't been to downtown in a while, and I usually get fairly good comps at places. I'm supposed to go there in December because of Cowboy Christmas. I love Cowboy Christmas because I have horses, and and I just, it's all during the rodeo and everybody's wearing a cowboy hat. But now with what they're doing with the sports thing, I was talking to one of the pit bosses the last time I was there, and he said it's going to ruin the town. I mean, because the sports people come in and they're rowdy and they don't care, and it's just not the same. And he said it's not going to help this town. It's really going to hurt it. And I said, I've already seen parts of it. I mean, I saw some guy flip out in the parking lot because the valet didn't bring his car in a minute or so, and he just started screaming, hollering, and yelling about that. And I thought, God, is it really going to get to this? So I mean, I love I really love the town, but I try to stay away from that. And I haven't been to Vegas this year. Usually I go at least a couple times, but I haven't. And I'm going for Cowboy Christmas because I really enjoy it. And I just love the people that are there, because you go there and these are people all from the Midwest and all of that, and the displays that they have and the handmade furniture is just terrific. I mean, I went to one booth and And this one lady, she had leather works, beautiful, beautiful stuff. And she had a purse up there and was on the top thing. And I said, God, can I see that purse? And she goes, you know, and of course everybody calls me ma'am, which, you know, I go, oh God, I'm at that age. Okay. You know, yes, ma'am. Hi, ma'am. You know, okay, fine. I'm at that age. All right. And so she goes, she gets a pole and she gets the purse down, and it's the leather was exquisite. And I'm looking at it, and she goes, and she's opening up the purse. She goes, see, the pocket's here. You can put your phone here and this. And then she pulls this thing down, and I said, well, what is that pocket for? She goes, oh, that's for your gun. And I said, oh, okay. And I went, okay, well, all right. No, I'm not going to get the purse right now, but it really is a beautiful piece of work. And all of that. And it's so funny because you go in to the convention center and you see these guys, and they, you know, they got the rifles, and they're showing all of that, you know. And I looked at my husband the first time I had walked in to Cowboy Christmas, and I took a look around, and I said to him, I said, I dare a terrorist to walk in here right now.
Yeah.
I dare one to walk in here right now.
Yeah.
But you know, it's just beautiful work. And I mean, I have found stuff there that I have brought home, you know, because I do have horses.
Yeah.
And there are things there that you can't find here. And I'm telling you, the handmade stuff, somebody had handmade a pool table, which was the most exquisite thing I had ever seen. Wow. It was just all hand carved. I'm telling you, it was beautiful. And the bronze works, you know, the statues of the horses, and the full-size statues of the horses and everything. So I was supposed to go to see a reining at South Point a month ago, and I went to try to get tickets, and they were sold out. And they said, well, if you want, you can still get a ticket, but it'll cost you $2,500 a ticket. I said, I'm not paying that for a horse show. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I said, oh my God. So I said, no, pass. So I, you know, canceled. I didn't go. And I've kept my cowboy Christmas stuff, which I have, which I'm looking forward to, because honest to God, you can find things there that you would never find anywhere else.
There you go, Cowboy Christmas
and so,
in Vegas.
you know, but now there's this hack thing going on that I'm hearing, and you know, it's just not the same, and it's sad because I basically grew up with Vegas. And you know, somebody asked me the other day, they said, do you have any mob stories? And I said, I do. I have one mob story.
Okay, now I got to hear it.
It was my birthday. Okay, I'll tell you.
Okay.
It was my birthday. And my mother said, you know, she said, what do you want to do for your birthday? I said, I want to go to Vegas. She said, all right. So we go to Vegas, and we're at some hotel, and Dean was playing there, and Jimmy Durante was playing there, so she knew all of them, okay? And so we're in this room, and I don't remember which hotel, I really don't, but this little short, bald-headed guy comes in with a cake, and it's happy birthday. And my mother goes, oh, popcorn, that's so sweet. Thank you. Oh, you didn't have to do that. Oh, I want to get a cake for your daughter. You know, happy birthday. Cake with the candles, the whole bit. And she goes, oh, popcorn, that's so sweet. Thank you so much, and all that. Well, I don't say it. So I blow out the candles. Happy birthday, blah, 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 later on. Never said anything. And a book came out, I guess, about a year later, maybe 2 years later, I'm not sure, called The Green Felt Jungle. and it was all about the mob in Vegas. It was about all the mob guys that actually ran Vegas.
Right.
And so my mother had read it, and so she said, do you want to read this? I said, yeah, sure. So I start to read The Greenfell Jungle, and I'm reading it, and there's a thing about a guy in there named Popcorn.
Mm.
And I stop and I go, wait a minute. So I walk in, she's in her room, and I walk in and I said, I'm reading this book. And she goes, yeah. And I said, well, there's a character in here called Popcorn. She went, yeah. I said, well, when we were in Vegas, you called the guy that brought the cake in to me, you called him Popcorn. She went, yeah. And I said, what, is it the same guy? And she went, yeah. Now I'm reading about this guy that takes a gun to these people's heads so that their heads pop.
Yeah.
Which is why he got the name Popcorn.
Oh, jeez.
And I said, so the guy in here is the same guy that brought me the birthday cake? She said, yes. And I went, and she says, have you gotten to Ice Pick Willie yet? I said, no, I haven't gotten to him yet. She said, well, yeah, he's also an interesting character. I said, yeah, he sounds like it. Okay. And I walked out of the room because she was so, yeah, it's him. Yeah. So.
Just so blasé about it.
The guy brings me a birthday cake. And I'm telling you, you would look at this guy, short, bald-headed. I mean, I can still see him. Short, bald-headed guy that you wouldn't think would harm a flea. And he walked in with a cake. We went and saw Dean that night. Dean sang happy birthday to me.
Wow.
And then after that, we went and saw Jimmy Durante, went backstage, and I had another cake with him. And that was my birthday in Vegas.
That's pretty surreal.
So it's like I said, I got a lot of stories.
Yeah, damn.
And but she had quite a life. I mean, when you think about it, you know, and the fact that she did what she did and she accomplished what she did.
Yeah.
And the fact that she never stopped, but she loved it. She absolutely loved the business. She really did. She never bitched about it, outside of the fact if she wasn't working.
Right.
Then she would call up like Aaron Spelling.
Yeah.
And she'd say, I'm not working. Come on. And he'd say, okay, I'll call you back. He'd call her back, and the following week she had a love boat. That's the honest to God's truth.
That's awesome.
And so I would sit there and I would listen to her saying, I'm not working. I'm not working. And then after all of that, then 4 Girls 4 came up, and she and that kind of resurrected her again, and it brought her back into her nightclub act.
Yeah.
So she wound up doing that. And they were on the road. It was her, Margaret Whiting, Helen O'Connell, and Rosemary Clooney. All older singers.
Yeah.
And I was actually producing a segment on them for a show here locally, CBS. And so I went on the road with them. And they're filling theaters, 3,000 and 4,000 people, selling out.
Awesome.
I am in shock. I don't mind telling you. I said, you got to be kidding me. And I'm thinking, but, the people loved him. They wanted to hear good music. And they filled theaters everywhere they went. And they were, Kansas City, and this theater in the Rounds, and then this, they played every top venue. at that time and filled it. And I'm telling you, I've got it on video. You've got the people coming in and they're just, it's crazy. It was absolutely crazy. But, it helped all four of them because the four of them were just kind of not really doing a whole heck of a lot.
Right.
And, they're good singers. And, my mother did the comedic part of it. She sang and then also did, comedy.
Right.
But, and it just brought the house down. I mean, standing ovations, and I'm backstage looking at this going, you got to be kidding me.
Mom still got it.
And I'm telling you, they absolutely loved it. It was hard work, and they were on the road, and they were in a bus, and I rode a bus through Ohio, which I'd never seen rain like that in my life. And and it was wow, it was really something. So I think, and she literally did that up until the point where she couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So and then of course and then we started into the film. And she loved that because and her memory was uncanny. Jason she was doing an interview with somebody asked her about the Copacabana, which she played in the 50s.
Right.
And they said, what was it like to play the Copacabana? Because that was a big deal in New York. And they said, what did it look like? She described the wallpaper on the walls of the Copacabana. She described how the layout was. And my mouth dropped listening to her. And she said, well, tables were there and the thing was there and the cash register was over there. And she said, oh, and by the way, the cash register had a bullet hole in it. And you go, what? And she would, we were, like I said, we had 65 scrapbooks. And we finally had to hire Kathy, who later worked for us, as a researcher because we couldn't keep up with all of the material.
Yeah.
It was uncanny, and just reels of film and all that. And one of the things that she would do is she would do a show. Let's say she would do Carson, and she would say to one of the crew guys, can I have a copy of that? And they go, yeah, sure. They'd go back and they'd run it off. And before she left the studio, she had the film can in her hand. And then Jason one day came out and said, I was at your mother's today. And I said, yeah. And he said, you're not going to believe what I found. I said, oh, God. I said, what'd you find now? He said, I found a film can underneath the couch. I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, it's a can. It's a show called Scoop the Writers. And I said, oh, my God, that was one of the first game shows. She was the first female game show host.
Wow.
Scoop the Writers. It's the only copy of the film, the only copy that even exists. And so he said, I went in and asked her, and she goes, oh, yeah, that's Scoop the Writers. Yeah, I was the first female host of that. I was the first female game show host. And he went, okay, so you're just going to lay that on me like now, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah, it had it under the couch.
It was under the couch. And to this day, he tells that story of looking under the couch.
That's funny.
Because he said, all of a sudden, he said, he saw something under, and then she said, I got a cabinet over here. You might want to look in there. And he went over and he looked at it, and that was all the 8mm films. So she had taken home movies of Vegas, of course.
Yeah.
And then Dick Van Dyke Show, back, just shooting and guys walking around and scenes, rehearsing and stuff like that in color, which of course Dick Van Dyke was never in color.
Right.
So, and I wound up having to copyright those because everybody wanted
Sure.
them. Yeah. So it became like, oh my God. And Jason said, you better copyright these
Yeah.
because people are coming out of the woodwork now.
Yeah. No
And
kidding.
I said, well, okay. But because we had so much stuff, we had just so much. And it just took 3 years to do that film. 3 years of just going over stuff and she, she would say something about, well, when I played this club in Cleveland and this and that, and she'd rattle off something, and they would go to the scrapbook of that year that she was talking about, and they would find the review of her act, the name of the place, probably a napkin that came from there. And I mean, it was crazy. She basically has 2 scrapbooks of the whole trip from New York to California when she eloped with my father, including every diner. She had never been to a diner before. And that was
funny.
like a big deal. She goes, I've never been to a diner.
Yeah.
And so they were traveling across the country. So it's an amazing story. It's something that, it's really, there's nothing like it. So.
Well, this has been a really, really interesting interview, and we're so glad that you came by.
Well, I'm so glad. Did I talk too much?
No, you did fine. Great stories.
Okay.
Loved it for sure.
Great.
Kat, any last thoughts?
Well, I mean, obviously, you can't sum up 90 years of stories, even just in the time that we've spent. There's so many more, I'm sure, to hear. But I guess the one thing that I just wonder is like, what is, if you could just choose one something that maybe people don't know about your mother, but you feel like they should, what would that be?
Well, I think, one of the things that I have emphasized, and so many people think that she is the persona that she played, and I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is the mark that she made on women as far as working in the business. A lot of people came up to her, including people like Marta Kaufman, who wrote Friends and all of that, and they said, if it wasn't for the character of Sally Rogers, I wouldn't have done because she was actually the first. She worked with men, she made the same salary, and all of that. And I don't think people realize the mark that she made on women. So many women have used to come up to her saying, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have taken the chance and written something. I wouldn't have done it. But I saw that Sally Rogers was making the same salary as the guys. She just wasn't a secretary. She was a writer. And at that time, women writers were kind of non-existent.
Yeah.
You had your show of shows that had mostly men. And so, you had very, very talented writers like Carl and Mel Brooks and people like that. But you didn't hear too often about a female writer. And I think the fact that she was told what a mark that she made on it, I think she really liked that, because she loved being the first or doing things that nobody else had done. And I think part of that, and I think the other part that people don't realize is how down to earth she really was, especially at home. And she was, everybody used to ask me too, is your mother as funny at home as she is on TV. And I'd laugh. And I go, yeah, right. I laugh all day long. No, because we were a family. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think that they carry on that persona that they see on screen.
Yeah.
Right.
Throughout their life. And they really don't. But I think the most important thing that meant to her was her mark as being some sort of somebody that women could look up to and say, you know what? I can do that. You know, I had talked to somebody and he said, my executive producer just said to me, if it wasn't for your mother, she wouldn't have become an executive producer. And you've got female writers now that have really made their mark. And the impact that she had because of that character and the fact that she was the person that she was, and she was very involved in, you know, animal charities and stuff like that. And I think the other thing that people don't know is how what good friends she was with Doris Day.
Yeah.
Because she wound up doing Doris's show.
Yeah.
And they became really good friends. And my mother talked to Doris Day a week before she passed away.
Wow.
They were on the phone, like, you know, girlfriends.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But I think that's probably the most important, is that she was a down-to-earth person. She was not a phony. And so many of them now are phonies. And they all put on a persona, and they all put on a certain air, and they all put on a certain, you know, they're what I say is that they're on, you know, and the minute that they walk out the door, they're performing.
Yeah.
She wasn't like that. She was who she was. And I never saw her refuse an autograph. Never. And now there's companies that sign up these people, and you got to pay $150 to get an autograph.
Yeah.
I never saw her. I have seen her literally have a fork to her mouth, and people have stuck a napkin in front of her and had her sign. I have seen it. And it is, she has never refused any kind of an autograph. She's always been grateful to her fans. She's always, and consequently, she has some of the most loyal fans I've ever seen. So I think that might be it.
Well,
and I was raised right, I guess.
Well, it's a fascinating life and a very fascinating person. I feel like, you know, it's like a part of history, and you're just giving us like all of these intimate details that we wouldn't know otherwise. So I really appreciate you being our guest and sharing her life.
Yes, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and you know, like I said, they can go to her Facebook page, or they can go to her webpage, MissRosemarie.com, and follow through. You know, all of her things are out there, and if they're really interested in a history of the business of, you know, show business, coming from vaudeville, Vegas, nightclubs, television, movies, and now, you know, a CD. It's amazing.
Right.
It's an amazing career. It really is.
All right, Noopy, thank you so much for coming by. We really appreciate it.
Listen, great. Thank you guys very, very much.
Oh, anytime. Come back and see us.
Okay, will do.
All right. Have a good evening.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. As always, if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, you can send those to Kat at iWritePlays@outlook.com, or you can write to me at backstorysessions@gmail.com or matt@level11ventures.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.